The NFL is an ever-changing league, and within the league and all of the movements, sometimes even great players fly under the radar with how productive they've been over not just one or two, but several years. And for every player we're excited to see in their new uniforms this year, like Davante Adams with the Raiders, Russell Wilson with the Broncos, and Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, among many, many others, there's plenty of veterans that have stayed with their teams this year and will more than likely be productive in 2022 as well. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing a handful of players that have very quietly put together Hall of Fame caliber careers. This video was suggested in a recent one, and I wanted to do a deep dive into a couple of underrated veterans, and we're going to do exactly that. So without further ado, let's begin. And we're going to start today's video with a surprising player you probably don't think about when hearing the words Hall of Fame, and it's Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. Keenan at this moment in time has 730 career receptions for over 8,500 yards and 48 touchdowns, and despite being in the league since 2013, is just now 30 years old. With Keenan, he and another offensive player we will discuss later are products of the era we're in the NFL, and that's that it's a more passing league and players are predictably putting up better stats than ever before and more gaudy numbers. But make no mistake of how productive Keenan has been over the past 5 years. He has 100 receptions in 4 of the last 5 seasons and has over 1,100 yards in 4 of the last 5 seasons as well, and the only year he didn't get to 1,000, he had 992 yards despite playing in 14 games. And translating those numbers to a full 16-game season that year, he would have had another 1,100-yard year. And with Keenan, there is admittedly a little bit of projection into his Hall of Fame resume, because if he retires right now, he's in the Hall of Very Good, and his current resume is not enough, especially in today's era. But Keenan plays with a quarterback who I'd like to think is a pretty good football player in Justin Herbert, and this is under the assumption both stay healthy for 17 games in 2022, but if Keenan and Justin stay healthy, there's no reason he can't have another 100-catch, 1,100-yard year, and if you want to say, well, he's getting old or Mike Williams will take over, my counter is this. Williams had 129 targets last year to Keenan's 157, and both had 1,100-yard years. They can produce in the same offense, and have. And the Chargers, to both Keenan and Mike's benefit, did not draft a receiver in the first round, and they will both receive a healthy amount of targets and continue to be productive football players. And with where we are as a society today and where NFL players are in terms of spending money on their bodies, Keenan isn't winging it going into his 10th NFL season and praying he can stay healthy and isn't working out all summer. No, not at all. But to address the fall off, because yes, it will happen at some point, I think Keenan still has at least one, if not two 100-catch seasons in him, because Justin Herbert isn't going anywhere, and at this point, I'd be surprised if he, meaning Keenan of course, wouldn't take a pay cut to stay in LA, given how good the quarterback play is. And then even after that, if Keenan plays until he's 34 or 35, what has to be remembered here is he's never been Tyreek Hill when it comes to speed, so I do believe he, more so than other NFL receivers, will stay productive as he ages, and given he already has over 700 catches, I'd be shocked if he finishes his career with less than 1,000, and at that point he would be 14th all time, and if he gets to 1,100 catches, he would be top 7 all time. The only concern I have is how many touchdowns will factor into his Hall of Fame resume, because he is lacking with 48, and 48 touchdowns isn't anything to be ashamed of, but when in the Hall of Fame conversation, you would want that number to be a lot closer to 100 than it currently is. And in the intro, we mentioned players that have stayed in the same place for a while that have had productive seasons, and although this player changed teams this offseason, we're going to discuss Chandler Jones and the Hall of Fame resume he's put together over the past decade. At this point in time, Chandler, believe it or not, is second among active players with 107.5 sacks and has 2 first-team All-Pros to his name. Chandler has more sacks than every current player not named Von Miller and is a Super Bowl champion, which only boosts to his resume, and has 7 double-digit sack seasons with 2 at or above 17 sacks. He is also a 4-time Pro Bowler and is now 32 years old. He's coming off of a 10.5 sack season and just signed in a favorable situation for himself, as he will get to play opposite of a beast in Max Crosby. Now, do I expect Chandler to have another 15 or 16 sack season at this point? I personally do not, but I could very much see him having another 10 or 11 sack season, and if he has one or two of those, then very quickly we're looking at a resume with over 125 career sacks, and at that point in his career, Chandler could very much stat pad in his age 34 or 35 season if he chooses to play at that age. If he were to add 30 sacks between now and his retirement, which over the course of 4 years and 68 games is entirely possible, he'd have 137.5 sacks and be tied for 14th all time. He would need just 4 sacks at that point to crack into the top 10, and Chandler, like a lot of other pass rushers from this generation, will lack the Defensive Player of the Year awards because out of the past 10 dating back to 2012, 6 have been won by J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald, and if you want to get technical, then you can say 7 have been won by players with the last name Watt or Donald. So he's naturally at a disadvantage there, but Chandler has the numbers and they will only get better as he goes into his mid-30s from a career standpoint. Next up, ironically, is another player that was dealt this offseason, but it is current Colts quarterback Matt Ryan. And with Matt, like with a lot of other quarterbacks from this era, this discussion will be brought up countless times, and it's, yeah, he was good, but he was never top 2 or 3 of his era, and that sort of conversation will be the main point for people that think he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. But with Ryan, the question is this: if Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer, shouldn't Matt Ryan be as well? Eli is a 2-time Super Bowl champion, yes, congratulations to him and the Giants, shout out Randy, but he never finished anywhere close to leading the league in anything other than interceptions, which he did 3 separate times. Ryan, on the other hand, has an MVP to his name, 4 Pro Bowls to his name, and will more than likely retire with over 400 career passing touchdowns. He's currently at 367, and over 60,000 passing yards. But if Ryan gets in, then who else does will be another question brought up when it's his time to be debated over of Hall of Fame writers and voters. And in his career, Ryan led the Falcons to 6 seasons of double-digit wins, had 10 seasons of over 4,000 passing yards, and had 3 seasons of 30 or more passing touchdowns, highlighted by a 38-7 TD to INT ratio year in 2016, in which the Falcons went to the Super Bowl. And obviously the loss wasn't solely on him, and the Falcons did not blow a 25-point lead because of Matt Ryan and Matt Ryan only, but this will also be brought up as it's a Hall of Fame, not a Hall of Shame, and that moment is one of the lowest points in sports history for any franchise, not just over the past decade, but ever. This is a player who was always overshined by another quarterback in his division in Drew Brees, and for a brief period in time, Cam Newton. But Ryan has been consistently good, and I think if he had a ring, it would be a slam dunk yes without thinking, and especially given who it would have been over in Super Bowl 51, but unfortunately he does not have that ring to add to his legacy. Next up is safety Harrison Smith of the Minnesota Vikings, who is quietly a 6-time Pro Bowler and has 29 career interceptions to his name. Harrison currently ranks tied for 3rd in active players with interceptions, tied with Patrick Peterson, and behind only Marcus Peters and Devin McCourty. He is a 2-time All-Pro safety, and that may be the knock on him is he only has 2 total All-Pros, but what I recommend is, if you ever get the chance, is listen to how his teammates and opponents talk about him, as opposing quarterbacks have said they make sure they know where he is prior to every snap, and he gets respect on a similar level to what Ed Reed used to in that regard. He has been the heart and soul of the Minnesota Vikings defense for a decade, and Vikings fans will be the first to tell you he was snubbed out of at least 1 Pro Bowl back in 2014, and arguably 2012, his rookie year as well, and the race for the Defensive Player of the Year award in 2017 with future Hall of Famer Aaron Donald was very, very close. He has over 850 tackles and 16.5 sacks as a safety, both of which outrank current Hall of Fame safety, who Harrison Smith is very favorably compared to in Troy Polamalu. To me, Harrison is and has been one of the more underrated players of the past 10 years, and I think he 100% deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. You guys know who I root for, and I do believe Harrison was very fitting for today's video. And let me know what you think in the comments about who else should be in the Hall of Fame. That's debatable, as I love these conversations and always look forward to hearing from you guys. But anyways, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, now is the time I ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because it would truly mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.